This story is titled, My Cousin Dumped Her Kid on Me for a Day, Vanished for a Week. So I made sure CPS got involved and now she is begging. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, so let me set the stage here. My name's Ashley, I'm 26 female, single, no kids, and just out here trying to figure out life like most people my age. You know the drill. Working a decent job, paying bills, trying to have some fun on weekends, and occasionally feeling like I'm just winging it day by day. Nothing out of the ordinary. My cousin Cherie, though? Her life is a whole different vibe. Cherie's 28 female, and became a mom last year to this adorable little girl, Penelope. She and I have always been close, like we grew up together. Close. We've got one of those family relationships where we know each other's embarrassing stories, can tell when the other is lying, and occasionally still bicker like kids. When she told me she was pregnant, I was thrilled for her. I mean, yeah, it was unexpected, but I figured if anyone could handle it, it was Cherie. She's always been headstrong, and I thought, okay, she's got this. Fast forward to her actually having Penelope, and I was kind of thrown into the role of the cool, supportive cousin. And honestly, I didn't mind. I'm not one of those people who avoid kids or freak out when they cry. Penelope is super cute, and I liked hanging out with her. Cherie would call me every now and then when she needed a break or had something to do, and I'd step in. No big deal, right? A couple of hours watching cartoons or taking Penelope to the park didn't feel like a chore. But here's the thing. I didn't realize just how much Cherie was leaning on me until things started to escalate. At first, it was little stuff, running errands or babysitting for an evening. It felt manageable, and I figured, I'm helping her out. She's probably just stressed adjusting to being a new mom. Cherie didn't have the most stable support system. Her relationship with Penelope's dad didn't last, and while she had my aunt and a few other family members around, they weren't exactly reliable. So, I stepped up. For a while it worked. Cherie got some time to herself, Penelope was happy, and I felt like I was doing a good thing. But looking back, there were a lot of red flags I just ignored because, well, it's family. Like there were times when Cherie would be late coming back, and I'd be sitting there thinking, okay, she's just running behind. But it kept happening. I'd agree to watch Penelope for a couple of hours, and it would turn into 3, then 4, then sometimes the whole evening. I remember one time when Cherie said she'd be back by 8 p.m., and I ended up staying until almost midnight. She texted me halfway through the evening saying she got caught up and would be a little late. No explanation, no apology, just a quick, thanks, you're the best. I was a little annoyed, but I brushed it off. What was I going to do, call her out? I figured maybe she needed the extra time, and it wasn't worth making a fuss. The thing is, I think Cherie started to assume I'd always say yes. It was like, because I didn't complain, she kept pushing the boundaries further. And honestly, I was kind of too nice to stop it. I didn't want to hurt her feelings or seem like I didn't care about Penelope. Plus, there's this unspoken pressure in our family to just deal with stuff quietly. My aunt, Cherie's mom, is big on the whole, family helps each other no matter what idea. And sure, I get that. But where's the line? At what point does helping turn into being taken advantage of? Anyway, back to Cherie. By the time Penelope turned 1, I was pretty much her go-to babysitter. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind helping out now and then, but it was starting to feel like I was the default option for anything Cherie wanted to do. But I also had my own stuff going on. I had work, hobbies, friends, and a life outside of babysitting. What's weird is that Cherie never really asked me how I was doing. Like, it didn't occur to her that maybe I had plans or things I needed to take care of. It was always about her schedule and what she needed. I'd try to bring it up casually like, hey, I've got a lot going on at work this week. But she'd just wave it off and say something like, oh, you're so good with Penelope. She loves you. It'll be fine. And I'd cave because I didn't want to cause drama. Looking back, I realize I should have set boundaries earlier. I should have been more upfront about what I could and couldn't do. But it's not always that simple when you're dealing with family. You don't want to be the bad guy or make things harder for someone you care about. So, I kept quiet and just dealt with it, hoping things would eventually balance out. If anything, Cherie started leaning on me more and more, like I was her built-in solution for every little thing. And the worst part is, she didn't see anything wrong with it. In her mind, I was just doing what family is supposed to do. But in mine, I was starting to feel like I was being treated less like a cousin and more like a free babysitter. So fast forward a bit, and we get to the night that started the whole mess. It was a Friday evening, and Cherie called me, sounding all sweet and casual. asking if I could babysit Penelope while she went out. She said she'd be back by 11:30 p.m. Now, I didn't have any big plans that night, so I figured, sure, why not? It wasn't unusual for her to ask me to watch Penelope, and I'd already gotten pretty good at it. Plus, I genuinely liked spending time with the kid. When I got to her place, everything seemed normal. Penelope was already fed, and Cherie gave me a quick rundown of her bedtime routine, which was nothing new. We played for a little bit, read a couple of books, and then I tucked her in. Easy peasy. Watching the kid wasn't the issue. The issue was what came after. So, 11:30 rolls around, and Cherie's not back yet. I'm not freaking out or anything, but I figured she'd at least text me if she was running late. At first I thought, maybe she got stuck in traffic. Then midnight hit, and I was like, what kind of traffic lasts this long? Did she decide to drive to a whole other city? By 1 a.m. I was Googling, can stress cause spontaneous combustion? Because I was about to lose it. Midnight comes and goes, and still nothing. At this point, I'm starting to get a little worried. I texted her like, hey, everything okay? What time are you heading back? No response. I called her phone and it went straight to voicemail. Now I'm thinking, all right, maybe her phone died or something. But still, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. By the time it hit 1 a.m., I was pacing around her living room, trying to stay calm. I mean, what if something happened to her? It's not like her to completely ghost me. I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a message. Nothing. I didn't want to overreact, but I was stuck in this weird place where I didn't know if I should be mad, worried, or both. Meanwhile, Penelope was sound asleep, completely oblivious to the chaos brewing. By 1 a.m., my brain was spiraling through every possible scenario. Was she okay? Did she run off to join a cult? Was she plotting a surprise heist? I kept pacing the living room like a detective, piecing together a mystery with no clues. Finally, at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. I nearly gave myself whiplash grabbing it, thinking Cherie had been abducted by aliens or something. Nope. Her text just casually said, staying at a friend's, see you tomorrow. Like she was texting a concierge, not the person watching her kid all night. All it said was, hey, I'm staying at a friend's tonight. It's late, so I'll just come back tomorrow. That was it. No apology, no thank you for staying up all night, nothing. I sat there staring at my phone like, are you kidding me? I didn't even know how to respond. I was relieved she was okay and not like in a ditch somewhere, but I was furious. She didn't even bother to let me know until hours after she was supposed to be back. And the way she phrased it, like it was no big deal, that just made it worse. By that point, I was too tired to argue. I figured, all right, Penelope's asleep. I'll just crash here on the couch and deal with this in the morning. But let me tell you, trying to sleep when you're both exhausted and annoyed is a nightmare. I kept tossing and turning, replaying the whole evening in my head and wondering what the hell Cherie was thinking. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Penelope crying. It was around 7:30 a.m., so I'd only gotten a few hours of sleep. I dragged myself off the couch and went to check on her. She was fine, just hungry, and probably wondering where her mom was. I got her some breakfast and tried to keep her entertained while I waited for Cherie to show up. Around noon, Cherie finally called. She didn't sound sorry or even remotely concerned about how the night went down. Instead, she was all cheerful, like, hey, thanks so much for watching Penelope. I really needed that. Can you keep her for the rest of the day? I've got some things I need to take care of. At that point, I was already annoyed, but I didn't want to argue in front of Penelope. So I said, yeah, I can watch her today, but you need to come get her later. Cherie agreed, yeah, sure. And I thought, okay, at least this is almost over. But then she casually added, oh, by the way, I'm thinking about going out of town for a few days. It's just a short trip, but I'll need you to watch Penelope while I'm gone. She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, like I didn't have my own job or life to deal with. I was stunned. I didn't even know how to respond. I tried to push back a little, saying, Cherie, I've got work this week. I can't just drop everything to babysit for several days. But she brushed it off, saying, oh, you'll figure it out. Penelope loves you and you're so good with her. It'll be fine. Then she hung up. I stared at the phone like she just asked me to build a spaceship. I mean, I like Penelope, but she's a toddler, not a Tamagotchi. You can't just hand her over and say, figure it out. For the rest of the day, I was in this weird headspace where I didn't know what to do. I felt bad for Penelope because she didn't ask for any of this, and it wasn't her fault. But what on earth is Cherie's mind for assuming I'd drop everything to take care of her kid? It wasn't fair, to me or to Penelope. That night, I started thinking about my options. I could just suck it up and try to make it work. But I knew that wasn't sustainable. I didn't have the experience or the bandwidth to take care of a toddler 24/7 for a week, especially with no warning. Plus, I had work the next morning, a job that I couldn't afford to mess up. But when my alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., I was already exhausted from barely sleeping the night before. Penelope was up early, full of energy, and there was no way I could get her ready, drop her somewhere, and make it to work on time. So I made the decision to call out. I told myself it was just one day, that I'd figure something out by the next morning. But then Tuesday came, and the same thing happened. Penelope needed constant attention, and I couldn't bring myself to leave her with anyone because I didn't have a solid plan. I called out of work again, feeling guilty but unsure of what else to do. By Wednesday morning, my manager called. She wasn't angry, but she made it clear that I couldn't keep missing work without notice. She asked if everything was okay and if I needed help. That conversation was the wake-up call I needed. As much as I loved Penelope and wanted to make sure she was okay, I couldn't keep putting my life on hold indefinitely. I realized I needed to find a solution, fast. Eventually, I decided to call a family friend, someone I knew was great with kids and had a more flexible schedule. I explained the situation, and they agreed to step in and help. I felt a little guilty about passing Penelope off to someone else, but at least I knew she'd be in good hands. I packed up her things, dropped her off at the friend's house, and went straight to work. I was relieved to have a plan in place, but the guilt and frustration lingered. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. But what else could I do? I wasn't her mom, and I wasn't equipped to handle this. Cherie didn't check in on Penelope at all. She didn't call, didn't text, nothing. I figured maybe she was busy packing or something, but it still rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, wouldn't you at least want to know how your kid was doing? Especially when you just left her with someone else for who knows how long? The whole thing felt off. I was effing angry. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Cherie. It was one of those super casual messages like, "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm heading out this afternoon. Thanks so much for helping out with Penelope. You're a lifesaver." A lifesaver. That's what she called me. Like I was just someone she could call up whenever she needed a break. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I texted back, trying to stay calm, but also making it clear that I wasn't okay with how she'd handled this. I said something like, "Cherie, I don't think you understand how much you're asking of me. I have a full-time job, and I can't just drop everything to take care of Penelope for a week. You need to figure something out because this isn't fair to me or her." Her response? "You're overthinking it. Penelope loves you and you're great with her. It's just a few days. Relax." That's what she told me. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to decide if I should call her and really let her have it, but I knew it wouldn't get through to her. Cherie's the kind of person who thinks her way is the only way, and no amount of arguing was going to change that. That's when I started thinking about what to do next. The family friend was fine watching Penelope for a little while, but I couldn't just leave them to handle everything. And honestly, I didn't think it was right for Cherie to keep acting like this was normal. It wasn't normal. You don't just leave your kid with someone indefinitely and expect them to figure it out. That's not how parenting works. I decided to call my uncle, Cherie's dad, to get his advice. He's the family's unofficial referee. Whenever the drama gets too hot, he's the guy with the whistle and the knock-it-off speech ready to go. When I explained the situation, he didn't sound surprised. If anything, he sounded tired. Like this wasn't the first time Cherie had pulled something like this. "She's always been like this," he said. "She assumes other people will pick up the slack for her. I've tried talking to her, but she doesn't listen. Maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs." A wake-up call? Maybe he was right. Maybe the only way Cherie would realize how serious this was would be if someone actually did something about it. But what? I didn't want to blow things out of proportion, but I also couldn't keep enabling her behavior. That's when I started thinking about CPS. It wasn't an easy thought to have, and it definitely wasn't something I took lightly. But Cherie's behavior wasn't just inconvenient, it was irresponsible. Leaving your kid without a clear plan, no communication, and no real concern for her well-being? That's not okay at all. Making the call to CPS was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. I kept second-guessing myself, wondering if I was doing the right thing or if I was just overreacting. But every time I thought about letting it go, I'd remember how Cherie just casually dumped Penelope on me like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was her child's life. And if she couldn't see that, then someone needed to step in. I explained everything to the CPS worker. The last-minute babysitting, the lack of communication, the way Cherie had just up and left without a plan. I made it clear that Penelope was safe with the family friend, but I felt like this situation needed to be addressed. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, just trying to process everything. I knew this was going to blow up in my face. Cherie wasn't the type to take criticism well, And I could already picture her screaming at me, calling me a traitor, and dragging the rest of the family into it. But I also knew I couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. Later that day, I got a call from the family friend. They'd been contacted by CPS, and they were understanding about the whole thing. They assured me that Penelope was fine, and that they'd cooperate with whatever CPS needed. Hearing that was a huge relief. At least I knew Penelope was safe and being cared for while all of this played out. That night, I didn't hear from Cherie. No texts, no calls, nothing. Part of me wondered if she even knew what was happening yet. The very next morning, I was jolted awake by loud banging on my apartment door. My heart sank because I already knew who it was. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there stood Cherie. I almost laughed. I mean, at least she remembered she has a kid, but she was livid. Her face was red, her hair was a mess, and she looked like she hadn't slept at all. She came in like the Kool-Aid man, yelling before I even had a chance to close the door. I half expected her to yell, "Oh yeah!" after each sentence. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted, pacing back and forth in my living room. "You called CPS on me? Are you serious? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't even get a chance to respond before she kept going, throwing accusations left and right. According to her, I had betrayed her, ruined her life, and made her look like a bad mom. She accused me of being jealous, spiteful, and incapable of understanding real responsibility. Every time I tried to say something, she'd cut me off. So I eventually just stood there and let her rant. Honestly, it was exhausting. She kept going in circles, blaming me for everything, while completely ignoring her own actions. At one point, she even said, "You're just bitter because you're child-free, and don't understand what it's like to be under this kind of pressure." That one stung, not because it was true, but because it showed just how little she understood where I was coming from. This wasn't about me being bitter or child-free or anything like that. This was about her dumping her kid on me with zero warning and no plan. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to get a word in. "Cherie, stop," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This isn't about you. This is about Penelope. You left her with me for an entire week without asking if I could handle it. That's not okay. She's your daughter, not mine." She didn't like that. "I trusted you," she shot back. "You're supposed to be my family. Family helps each other out, but instead you called the authorities on me. Do you know how humiliating that is? I'm her mother. Not you, not anyone else. Me." "That's exactly the point," I said, my frustration finally bubbling to the surface. "You're her mother, and it's your responsibility to make sure she's taken care of. You can't just dump her on me and disappear. What if I couldn't handle it? What if something happened to her? Did you even think about that?" She didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she just kept deflecting, blaming me for blowing things out of proportion, and insisting that I should have handled it differently. When I asked her what I was supposed to do, just suck it up and take care of Penelope indefinitely, she didn't have a real answer. It was clear she hadn't thought this through at all. By the time she finally left, I was completely drained. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. Within hours, I started getting calls and texts from other family members, all of them with their own opinions about the situation. My aunt, Cherie's mom, was the first to call. She was furious. "How could you do this to Cherie?" she demanded. "You're supposed to support her, not tear her down. She's been through so much already, and now you're making it worse. Family doesn't call the authorities on each other." I tried to explain my side of things, but she wasn't having it. To her, I was the villain who had escalated things unnecessarily. She kept saying, "You should have just talked to her," as if I hadn't already tried that. It was like no one wanted to acknowledge that Cherie was the one who put me in this position in the first place. Thankfully, not everyone in the family was against me. My uncle called me later that day to say he supported my decision. "You did the right thing," he said. "Cherie needs to be held accountable for her action. This isn't about punishing her. It's about making sure Penelope is safe." Hearing that was a relief, but it didn't make the rest of the family drama any easier to deal with. Work became a nightmare too. My phone would buzz nonstop with calls and messages, and I found myself constantly distracted, wondering what fresh drama was waiting for me every time I checked my notification. I even started dreading social events because I never knew which family members were mad at me until they brought it up. It felt like everywhere I turned, there was another person telling me what I should have done differently, and then there was Cherie herself. After her initial meltdown at my apartment, she didn't contact me directly again, but I knew she was still angry. I'd hear from other family members that she was telling everyone how I had betrayed her and made her life miserable. What hurt the most was how she completely ignored Penelope in all of this. It wasn't about what was best for her daughter. It was about Cherie saving face and avoiding responsibility. She never once asked me how Penelope was doing, or showed any concern for how the situation might have affected her. It was all about her and how unfair she thought it was. Penelope was still staying with the family friend, and CPS was looking into the situation. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I hoped it would serve as a wake-up call for Cherie. She needed to take responsibility for her actions and start putting Penelope's needs first. Whether or not she'd actually do that, though, was anyone's guess. The week dragged on like a never-ending marathon of guilt trips, arguments, and second-guessing. But finally, the situation started to come to a head. CPS had done their initial assessment and decided to set up a meeting with Cherie. I wasn't directly involved, but our family friend, who had been watching Penelope, let me know that CPS was serious about making sure Cherie understood the gravity of what had happened. Hearing that gave me a strange mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, I felt validated. On the other, I knew the real fallout was still coming. One afternoon, my uncle called me. He'd just spoken to Cherie and he wanted to give me a heads up about what was going on. "She's furious, as usual," he said, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I think she's starting to realize this isn't just going to go away. CPS is making her jump through some hoops and she's not happy about it." "What kind of hoops?" I asked. "She has to take a parenting class and meet with a social worker regularly for a while. They're keeping Penelope with the family friend for now, which honestly is the equivalent of giving Cherie a yellow card in soccer. It's a warning, not a full penalty, but she better get her act together. She's blaming you for all of it, of course." That last part didn't surprise me. Cherie had made it clear from the start that she thought this was all my fault. But what did surprise me was what my uncle said next. "I told her she has no one to blame but herself," he said. "I told her this was a wake-up call, and she should be thanking you for stepping in when she couldn't handle things." Hearing that kind of support, especially from someone in the family, was a huge relief. For the first time, I felt like someone really understood where I was coming from. But at the same time, I knew Cherie wasn't going to see it that way. Sure enough, Cherie eventually found a way to contact me directly. She called me one evening, her tone less angry but still laced with resentment. "I just want to know why you did this," she said. "Why couldn't you just talk to me? Why did you have to call CPS and blow everything up?" "Cherie, I tried talking to you. Do you remember what I said that morning when you told me you were leaving for a week? I told you I couldn't handle it. You brushed me off like it didn't matter. You didn't even ask if I was okay with it. And then you left Penelope with me anyway." "That's not fair," she said quickly. "I trusted you. I thought you'd be there for me." "This isn't about trust," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is about responsibility. You didn't make a plan for Penelope. You just assumed I'd figure it out. That's not okay. She's your daughter, Cherie, not mine." There was a long pause on her end, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hear me. But then she said, "You could have just handled it quietly. You didn't have to call CPS. Do you know how humiliating this is for me?" I sighed. "Cherie, please understand, this isn't about humiliating you. This is about making sure Penelope is safe and that you understand how serious this is. You can't just leave her like that and throw your kid on other people to take care of." She muttered something about me being dramatic, like calling CPS was the same as forgetting to water her plants, and then hung up. It wasn't the resolution I wanted, but at least I got to say my piece. In the days that followed, the family drama started to settle, at least on the surface. CPS continued to work with Cherie, and Penelope stayed with the family friend for a little longer. My aunt eventually stopped calling me, though I'm pretty sure she's still holding a grudge. The group chat went quiet for a while, which was honestly a blessing. I think everyone was just burned out from all the arguing. As for me, I started focusing on getting back to some sense of normalcy. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends, and did my best to ignore the lingering tension with certain family members. It wasn't easy, but it felt good to reclaim my time and energy. One day, a few weeks later, I got a text from the family friend who had been watching Penelope. "She's doing great," they wrote. "Still her happy, curious little self. CPS says she'll be able to go back to Cherie soon, but they're keeping an eye on things. Just thought you'd want to know. As of now, Cherie and I still aren't on great terms. I don't want it to be. I just like to F off anyone from my life when they cross my boundary. And if I gained something from all this mess, I've learned two things. 1. Never agree to babysit without an ironclad exit plan. And 2. Sometimes being the bad guy is just another way of saying, I'm the only one with common sense. If that makes me the villain, I'll wear the cape." I also started to put boundaries even with family. I had to start saying no like it was my full-time job because, apparently in this family, yes translates to open 24/7 babysitting hotline. Also, just because someone is related to you doesn't mean you have to put up with being taken advantage of. Sometimes, doing the right thing means standing your ground, even if it means upsetting people you care about. It's been a messy, exhausting journey, but I don't regret what I did. Penelope is safe, and Cherie is being held accountable. If that makes me the bad guy in some people's eyes, so be it. I can live with that. And that's where things stand for now. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. Do you think I went too far? What would you do if you were in my place?